So, some big news broke this morning on a couple of Chinese news sites that Chinese company TenCent is in talks now with Hasbro to acquire entirely the Dungeons and Dragons IP. Now, apparently, this all began with Hasbro approaching Larian Studios, a little company you might have heard of that made a little game you might have heard of called Baldur's Gate 3, highly successful, of course. And Hasbro needs a cash infusion, so they were offering to sell the D&D brand to Larian. Larian doesn't seem to have the kind of capital they would need to do that, but they began facilitating talks with TenCent instead, because TenCent has something like a 30% stake in Larian. So what does this mean for the future of the tabletop game? That's what we're going to talk about. I'm Dave, this is the one and only RPG Rundown, and this video is... TenCent, D&D, and you. So a little background here. If you've been following developments for about a year now, you know that Hasbro is in a pretty big financial crisis. They have negative cash flow. Magic the Gathering is a huge cash cow for them, but toys and other board games are not doing well. D&D is doing okay, but it's not really a big moneymaker for them compared to something like a Magic the Gathering. So a sale could give them a cash infusion, and that might solve their negative cash flow problems to get them by and have some hope of surviving as a company. Because seriously, they seem to be in some big trouble. Many people are speculating a sale to someone like Larian. Makes sense. Larian right now has to pay license fees, presumably, to use the D&D name and the D&D intellectual property that appears in the video game. Probably rules, classes, things like that. So a sale to a video game company, especially with D&D becoming a little bit more of a software product with D&D Beyond, along with their tabletop stuff, it does seem like a sensible move. But what would this really mean? Now, the main motivation also for TenCent seems to just be to own the D&D IP license so they could make more D&D video game titles. TenCent has an ownership stake in many, many video game companies. You can see a partial list on Wikipedia, but even Larian does not appear in that list, so I think there's even more. But it's unclear to me what this means for the tabletop game. It doesn't seem likely that a company like TenCent wants to suddenly directly enter the tabletop game market. They're a software company. I don't know if they just want to start making what amounts to books. Maybe they could continue the D&D Beyond product on their own. Maybe they could invest in D&D Beyond. But the tabletop game itself, the books, the classes, the rules, all of these things, I wonder what's going to happen to that. Of course, the internet today is absolutely abuzz with this news. Everyone's got an opinion. I have concerns and questions. And these are the concerns and questions I have. One of them is a question a lot of people have today, and that is TenCent going to be an even worse custodian as a corporate overlord over D&D than Hasbro was? Maybe not. I mean, they seem pretty hands-off with Larian, but who knows? They have made some moves in China that have already gotten them into trouble. They tried to do a big video game merger, and the Chinese government struck it down, said it was an antitrust problem. It would create a monopoly that wasn't acceptable. So who knows? There's also the TikTok problem. This is a Chinese company subject to the Chinese government. Now, this is not a statement against the Chinese people. I have no general distrust of Chinese people running a business. But it's the way the law works in China and the way that the government interacts with IP ownership in particular that has me a little concerned. I also wonder if TenCent will harvest data from D&D Beyond or other products, which would then maybe be available to the Chinese government. Again, this is kind of the TikTok problem. My last concern is that D&D will become nothing more than an IP license that is passed around from game publisher to game publisher instead of one entity being a custodian of it, overseeing it, being really not just monetarily invested in it, but invested in it as a tabletop game. If TenCent doesn't do that and they just farm out the IP to a publisher and they're not happy with the publisher, so they move it again, this could be something that destabilizes the game. I've been through this already with a couple of settings that I like, Conan the Barbarian and Lord of the Rings. I can remember right now at least 2 Conan the Barbarian publishers with very different game systems. And recently, Modiphius, who did the 2D20 version, the most recent version of Conan, has lost that IP. And I don't know who's going to publish a game for Conan again. Might be a long time. Same thing with Lord of the Rings. I can think of 3 different systems for Lord of the Rings. Middle-earth Role-Playing, another company that had it around the time the movies came out. I don't remember the name of that company. Maybe I'll put it in a text thing here when I edit later. Here, look. Here's a title that says who the company is. And now it's Free League. Also, Free League has put out a 5e adaptation. this kind of thing could start happening to D&D itself. How many different beholder stats do I want to figure out in the coming years if this IP shifts around? I don't know. We'll see what happens. This all could just be a rumor. So far, I've only read a couple of posts on Chinese news sites. They do seem to cite reliable sources, but also maybe nothing will come of this and Tencent will decide not to do the acquisition. I guess we'll find out in the coming days or weeks. What do you think about this? Are you worried about Tencent acquiring the IP for D&D? You worry about its effect on the game? Give me your thoughts in a comment. This is an exciting and kind of scary topic. Let's talk about it. And until next time, may all your 20s be natural.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. Of course, it always helps us out if you like and subscribe. And check this video's description for a link to a few other cool things from Game Talk Network. Links to other channels in the Game Talk Network, like the Board Game Rundown, the Miniatures Rundown, and the Lorcana Rundown. A link to our Patreon for the Game Talk Network, where RPG Rundown is one of the pledge levels you can select. And a link to our GTN Discord server. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.
To acquire the Dungeons & Dragons IP. Now, this apparently began with your mom.
Oh shit!